Stop putting people on a pedestal. No, really, stop. Hi, I'm Selena and welcome to Selena's Musings. This is where I like to share my thoughts, perspectives, ideas, and things that inspire me with the goal of really helping myself and others become the best version of ourselves. Now, today what I wanted to talk about is why you should not put people on a pedestal and the ways in which it's really unhealthy and even toxic, not just for the other person, but for you. Now, I want to be really clear. There's a difference between putting a person on a pedestal and admiring or appreciating or being inspired by some really dope traits or characteristics or gifts that a person has, right? So when I look at somebody like Simone Biles, I can't help but really admire the gift that she has for gymnastics. She's super talented, and that's to be admired, right? But what I'm not going to do is put her on a pedestal and act like because she's really gifted in this area that she's going to be a perfect person that doesn't make any mistakes or any flaws, right? And I think that that is the primary problem with putting people on a pedestal. We really rob them of their humanity. I mean, it's dehumanizing in a pretty literal sense, in the sense that when we're putting folks on a pedestal, we're basically acting as though they are more than human, superhuman, divine even sometimes. We give them these qualities that really we make up in our minds sometimes, right? It's like we're adding the reality of who they are with our fantasies of how they should be at all times. And that's a really unrealistic position that we're putting them in. So ultimately, it's like we're setting them up for a big, big L, right? We see this a lot with our civil rights leaders. We saw how people put Dr. King on a pedestal, and when it was leaked that he wasn't perfect, suddenly people wanted to question everything. And because we think that for some reason excelling in one area means that you're some sort of virtuous person that can do no wrong, we elevate them to this position that is impossible to actually maintain in reality. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't hold people accountable. Most certainly. But actually, when we put people on these pedestals, sometimes it has the odd effect of kind of blinding us to the reality of their actual behavior because we're relying more on our fantasies than actual reality. And this is a particularly tricky, I think, matter when it comes to folks in positions of power, as well as people who we're in some sort of intimate or close relationship with. When we look at people who are in positions of power, when we put them on these pedestals in our minds, sometimes we are either blind to ways in which they may actually be falling short in ways that are detrimental, right? In ways that we should absolutely question. But folks say, oh, no, we can't question them. You know, they're like the next coming, which is absolutely wrong thinking. We need to be able to applaud folks when they're doing the right thing and call them out when they're not doing the right thing, right? And when I say call them out, I'm not talking about, right out canceling people, because that's the kind of extreme opposite we see with this whole pedestal behavior. What I'm talking about is acknowledging what is true and what is actual and what is really happening, where we have some folks that are doing great things. And when they make mistakes, we need to talk about that. Hey, this is where you can do better. So let's talk about this in the realm of celebrity. A lot of times people are launched into celebrity because they have some gift. It might be a gift for acting or athleticism or politics. Whatever the case is, they're really gifted in that area or in some way are really impressive in that area. And for that reason, they're elevated to this level of fame and notoriety and celebrity, right? So the term celebrity in and of itself, we're celebrating this person. A lot of times, however, we're not just celebrating their gift, we're putting them on this elevated pedestal where we act as though they are not human, which is wild. It's wild. And I can't even imagine how dehumanizing it must be for somebody like Beyonce, who can't even be seen with a blemish on her face without people blowing it up like a big deal. She can't gain a few pounds without people picking her apart, because in their minds, it's like she's not a human being. And while on the one hand, it seems great because people regard her as being a queen and so gifted and perfect, she's not perfect. And when we act as though she is perfect, I would imagine it creates all this pressure. I think about the song that she wrote called Pretty Hurts, and I'm sure that came from a true place. Actually, I'm not sure if she wrote it. Maybe she did, but I know she performed it. But yeah, this idea that you have to live up to these expectations that people have made for you. And it gets tricky when people's perfections or rather when people's expectations have turned into fantasies of perfection, because nobody is perfect. Now, in reality, I think if we just celebrated people for their gifts while still recognizing that they have flaws, it makes for a healthier relationship. Let's consider intimate relationships, romantic relationships, for example. It's really common and unhealthy for folks to idealize their partner, especially in the beginning. We focus on all the wonderful things that we love about that person, and sometimes we build a fantasy up in our heads that only take into account all these wonderful, fabulous things. And then as we start to see flaws and faults, the real human traits that they have, we are super, super disappointed, not because these flaws are unacceptable and truly toxic things that we shouldn't deal with, but because we have built up some sort of expectation in our mind that is superhuman. One of my friends, James Coe, has this quote that I really love. I'd rather allow you to see my flaws than to cut our relationship in half. And I think that's a really beautiful perspective, because when we're in relationship with other people, whether it's with a romantic partner or a boss or a mentor or a parent or a sibling, we really do the relationship in whole a disservice when we elevate this person to such a standard that they feel that they cannot show us their flaws. Not only does it mean that they're withholding from us and we're not getting to know the true depth of who they are as a human being, but we're also robbing them of the opportunity to receive support from us in making progress in those areas where they need to improve, right? So if I, for example, have a really close friend who doesn't really allow me to feel comfortable in showing them my flaws, and I'm always kind of projecting for them to keep up with this image of perfection that they have, I might be hesitant to tell them, hey, I'm actually really struggling with this. I need your help, right? And so that kind of kills intimacy in a way. And what happens is that we're building relationships on pretense because we're trying to either keep folks elevated on this pedestal, or we've created pressure for them to stay elevated on this pedestal that we've created for them, or both, right? So I think that it's really worth examining and asking yourself, is it that I'm really admiring a person's skills or gifts or characteristics and appreciating the fact that they're still human and they have flaws and they make mistakes? Or am I putting this person on a pedestal and creating unfair, unreasonable kind of fantasies about them being this flawless person? You know, there's another saying, you should never meet your heroes. And it's a saying because people are often disappointed when they meet their heroes. I mean, and there are definitely there's some validity to that, in that some people really are just kind of fake and they put up a front and a mask and they're one way with their kind of public persona and they're a totally different person. But more than not, what I have found is that they're just human beings and they're flawed. And they still have all these great attributes, but because people have built up these kind of superhuman fantasies of who they must be in their mind, whenever they meet these folks, they're inevitably disappointed when they find out that they are mere mortals. So do yourselves a favor and really temper your expectations. Really regard the fact that everyone who is a human being on this planet Earth falls short of perfection, no matter how gifted they are in other areas. I would love to hear in the comments below about times maybe where you felt like you were put on a pedestal and it was unfair, or maybe times when you realized that you were putting someone on a pedestal and it really wasn't a realistic thing. Thank you for spending a few minutes with me hearing my thoughts. You are my muses. You really inspire me to get on here and share these different ideas with you. Otherwise, as always, I'll be including some information down below. Hope you have a good one.